2. 2 Samuel chapter 2. I'm going to read the first 13 verses. 2 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 through 13. In the course of time, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah?" he asked. The Lord said, "Go up." David asked, "Where shall I go?" "To Hebron," the Lord answered. So David went up there with his two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David also took the men who were with him, each with his family, and they settled in Hebron and its towns. Then the men of Judah came to Hebron, and there they anointed David king over the tribe of Judah. When David was told that it was the men from Jabesh Gilead who had buried Saul, he sent messengers to them to say to them, "The Lord bless you for showing this kindness to Saul, your master, by burying him. May the Lord now show you kindness and faithfulness, and I too will show you the same favor because you have done this. Now then, be strong and brave, for Saul your master is dead, and the people of Judah have anointed me king over them." Meanwhile, Abner, son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. He made him king over Gilead, Ashuri, and Jezreel, and also over Ephraim, Benjamin, and all Israel. Ishbosheth, son of Saul, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. The tribe of Judah, however, remained loyal to David. The length of time David was king in Hebron over Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Abner, son of Ner, together with the men of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, left Mahanaim and went to Gibeon. Joab, son of Zeruiah, and David's men went out and met them at the pool of Gibeon. One group sat down on one side of the pool, and one group on the other side. May the Lord add his blessings to the reading of his word. Today I've entitled the sermon Jerking Jerks, and I'll explain that to you a little later on. I've come across this matrix on the internet, and it's called a strategic relationship matrix. Can you imagine that even relationships can be strategic? Well, it's funny to me because it talks about relationship in terms of an X and Y axis. And here you will find that the X axis is about maintaining a relationship, and the Y axis has to do with the profit of that relationship to you, right? So it's maintenance of a relationship against the profit of that relationship to you. And it has something like this. It fixes it according to priorities. And so if you look at the pictures there, they are actually priorities depending on which quadrant you fall in. And so priority 4, number 4, it means high maintenance but low profit. And therefore, that relationship is like you have a dog. You know, you have to maintain the dog. You know, high maintenance dog, but its profit to you is just a little. You know what I'm saying? Just a little bit. So it's a dog. That's priority 4. And then you have priority 3, which is high maintenance, but also yielding a high profit in terms of a relationship. And what is that? It's a question mark. It's a question mark because you have a choice. Do I keep this relationship because it's too high of a maintenance issue for me, but yet, you know, the profit is quite high? You have a choice. Should I, shouldn't I get involved, invest my time in this relationship? So it's a question mark. Priority 2, low maintenance, low profit. And it's a star, right? I mean, you're not doing much about this relationship. You get a little bit of profit, so should you keep it? Maybe you should. That's why it's a star. Priority 1, low maintenance, high profit. In other words, you don't have to do anything about this relationship, but you profit from it. Therefore, it's a cow. It's called a cash cow. I mean, you don't do anything, but you profit a lot from it. I wonder because sometimes in business, they look at relationships this way. You know, there's a certain dollar sign before your face. You know, sometimes in church, we approach people maybe this way too. I hope not, but sometimes maybe we do. I won't invest my time with that certain person because it's just high maintenance. And there's little profit that I can get out of it. You know, sometimes we tend to view people this way, don't we? Well, I hope not. But we cannot keep people looking at us this way. That there is a dollar sign for every face and looking at us in terms of value to them. In other words, people look at us as functional. That we have a certain utilitarian purpose for them. They use us for their benefit. You see, they see our value in terms of what worth we are to them personally. And you know what? David had such people around him. And they were powerful people around him. And just when Saul has finally left the scene, David is probably saying, finally, I can pursue God's agenda without obstacles. Oh, finally, I have no children anymore. I can do God's work. Oh, finally, I have a job. I can do God's work. Follow His agenda for me. But you see, new situations put a spin into people's characters. Powerful people abound, and they seemingly are there for God's agenda, but on closer examination, you'll find out they're actually self-serving. You know, they are there because you would think, just by basing it on the outward, they're there for God, they're there for you, but in reality, they're there for themselves. Lots of people. And you know what the Bible calls them? Jerks. No, the word for jerk is not in the Bible. They're called fools. F-O-O-L, fools. And if you're Filipino, you know what a fool is? Somebody describe a fool this way. Fool, be careful, because you might fall into the swimming pool. Now, the Korean can't understand that, but we can. Fools, that's what the Bible calls such people. Jerks, as we call them today. It's tough pursuing God's agenda when jerks wear us out, when fools are around us. And so the question for us this morning, what are jerks like? What are fools like? And so here we come, 2 Samuel 2 up to chapter 4, 3 chapters. Saul is dead. David's crowned king of Judah. Remember, king of Judah, not Israel. Yes, that's right, only Judah. You see Abner, which we read, the general of King Saul, who's now dead, the general himself. Abner, Saul's general, amassed power, installed Saul's remaining son. What's his name? Ishbosheth. Very good. Ishbosheth is the name. There was a son that remained. So not only were some of the sons killed together with Saul, like Jonathan, right? There was a son that remained. His name is Ishbosheth. And Abner seized the opportunity to proclaim him as the new king of Israel. Now, you see, there's a general also under David. His name is Joab. So I want you to remember all these characters. Abner under Saul. Joab is under David. And Joab is a nephew of David. David's sister is the mother of Joab. We find that in Chronicles. At any rate, here are two generals. What started as one kingdom under Saul has now become two factions. Not two kingdoms, just two factions. In other words, what we find is Saul's madness against David carries itself through even until the divided kingdom of King Solomon. It carries itself through. And so let me say this at the outset. We do not exist in a vacuum. We don't. In fact, our present circumstances, they are inextricably linked with our past. We live in terms of consequences. The accumulation of the decisions of the past, the right choices, the wrong choices, they all show up today. Whether it was you who made the choice or somebody else, who influences you, whatever it is, today, all those decisions reveal itself in your life. The question is this: are we investing right now? Because we can't do anything about the past. Are we investing right now in right choices, right moves, right actions, no matter how small today? Because all those tend to accumulate, and then it will reveal its consequences tomorrow, perhaps not in your life, but in the life of your children. We live in terms of consequences. Now, turn with me now to chapter 2. We'll begin with verse 8 to 23. Now, Gibeon, right? They're in the pool of Gibeon, Abner's forces, Joab's forces. Now, Gibeon, what's Gibeon? You see, Gibeon is the center of Israel at the time of Saul. Remember, there's no Jerusalem yet. Gibeon was the center of Israel. That is where Saul made his residence. It's Gibeon. However, Saul's people, Abner and company, are no longer in Gibeon. They're in Mahanaim. Why? Because the Philistines drove them off. You remember? Yeah, you remember that. So they now return to Gibeon, but not really to settle, but just to have a good time. And so here they are. Abner takes his men to an R&R in Gibeon pool. Then General Joab from Judah brings his men also to visit. There was no plan, but suddenly here they are. They are together on opposite sides of the pool. This is a momentary ceasefire, by the way. They are R&Ring. No war, right? And so then the two generals exchange pleasantries, and suddenly they have an idea. And here's the idea, right? Here's the idea on verse 14. Verse 14 goes like this. Abner suggested to Joab, let's have a few of our warriors fight hand-to-hand here in front of us. Hand-to-hand combat between our warriors. And you know what Joab said? Okay, sounds good, he agreed. So, verse 15, so 12 men were chosen to fight from each side. It's like a basketball match, but it's a pool. Verse 16, each one grabbed his opponent by the hair and thrust his sword into the other side so that all of them died. Can you imagine what went on in there? I just couldn't believe it myself. But that's what happened. It's like a wrestling match. And maybe Joab, maybe Abner had the whistle, and everybody was in place, everybody in partner with the other, holding the hair with a knife on the belly or wherever. And when the whistle blows, whoever's quickest to the draw, shove that thing into the opponent. It's like a wrestling match. But you see what happens? They were all so sharp. They were all so spitfire. They all killed one another. Just like that. 24 people dead. That's a duel. All 12 pairs are swift. They all die. And so what begins as fun turns deadly. And that is silly. You know what a jerk is? A jerk is bloodthirsty for sport, competition, fun, tournaments. Let's just do it. In fact, let's add a little bit of drama to this game. Let's put some money into it, right? You would think this is over. It's not. A brawl ensues after 24 people are dead with the rest of the goons and the gangs while Abner flees the scene. He flees. He goes back to Mahanaim. Now, you see, Joab had a kid, Usain Bolt. You know who Usain Bolt is? He's the fastest sprinter in the world. Usain Bolt from Jamaica, is it? He retired now. Wants to get into soccer. I'm not sure he'll do that. Usain Bolt, he's the fastest man. Asahel is the name. Kid brother of Joab. And you know what Asahel does? He says, I'm fast. And even if you run, I'm going to get you because I'm fast. Now, he pursues Abner, this Asahel, because he wants Abner killed as well, the kingpin, right? So what does Abner do? He pleads to Asahel and says, go back, little kid. Go back. This is worthless. He understands better now. This is a worthless thing. Go back. I'm fleeing already. The tournament's over, right? 12 against 12, all dead. It's even. Go back. Well, verse 21 goes this way. But Asahel kept right on chasing Abner. And you know what Abner does? As he runs this way, he knows Asahel is behind him. He's holding a spear, this Abner. And he knows he's fast. And as he runs forward, he walks probably, he puts his spear this way, with the sharp edge that way. Asahel is behind. And as he was running himself, Abner, he just held onto the spear this way, as tightly as he could. And then he stopped abruptly. And as he stopped abruptly, put on the brakes, Asahel, speeding, hits the butt of the spear into his belly, out of his back. He's dead. He's dead. You see, the Bible tells us that. Asahel kept right on chasing. Abner thrust the butt end of his spear through Asahel's stomach, and the spear came out through his back. He stumbled to the ground. He died there. And at that moment, time stood still. When everybody saw the dastardly sight of their speedster impaled on Abner's spear, everything stopped. Joab took a look at his little brother. He's weeping, and even saw the name of Abner etched on that spear. That's not true. Well, sometimes we make the silliest decisions, don't we? And hopefully they do not lead to catastrophic events. Bloodthirsty for sport, game, competition. There's more to this. Verses 24 through 32. Now the sun was setting. It was getting dark. Joab called it a day. Abner said, go home. Let's call it a day. And Joab agreed, let's call it a day. But he remembers the spear on his brother's belly. As darkness swept through, the cashier's register began to close. It was time to account. And so verse 30 goes like this. When Joab counted his casualties, he discovered that only 19 men were missing in addition to Asahel. But 360 of Abner's men had been killed, all from the tribe of Benjamin. Joab and his men took Asahel's body to Bethlehem, buried him there in his father's tomb. When you look at it in terms of a game, that's a ratio of 18-1, almost. 18 men of Abner dead to one dead man of Joab. That's a great victory, isn't it? But you see, Asahel is not just 1 point. Asahel is 500 points, more than the 360 that have died. And therefore, who's winning this game? Abner is. As far as Joab is concerned, Abner is on top. He counted. You know what a fool does? A fool keeps score. He records everything because he thinks in his mind there will be a reckoning. There will be another day, another opportunity, and we'll see what happens then. So that there's a record, so we don't forget. When we're offended, we dare not forget. We keep score. There will be a reckoning. Chapter 3, we are in now. I'll start with verse 6. What happens then? General Abner is not just street smart. You see what he did with that spear? He's smart. He's also shrewd. He's also sleek. He's superior to Ishbosheth. Ishbosheth, the king, is actually a puppet king. And the real ruler of Israel is Abner, the general, the strong man. You see, Ishbosheth, he's indebted to Abner for making him the king. Abner could have just decided, let's all surrender to David. Anyway, he's the king, really, not Saul, right? But instead, he seized that opportunity and saw this weakling named Ishbosheth. You know what Ishbosheth means? A man of shame. I don't know what it is, but there's something about this man where he's not really in the story of Saul, but here he is. He's a man of shame. And Abner makes him the king after Saul. Now, General Abner commanded loyalty from the national armed forces, and made Ishbosheth king over all of them. And so he's indebted to Abner, isn't he? Right? See, Abner was the real ruler of Israel behind the king. Ishbosheth grew suspicious one day that his general was having an affair with his father's mistress. True or not, I don't know, because we're not told whether it's true or not. But Ishbosheth the king grew suspicious, and he confronted his general about this alleged affair. And like a true blue secretary of defense, he gets defensive. He was furious. That's why in verse 8 of chapter 3, it goes this way. Am I some Judean dog to be kicked around like this? After all I have done for your father, is this my reward? And verse 9, may God strike me and even kill me if I don't do everything I can to help David get what the Lord has promised him. I love verse 10. I'm going to take Saul's kingdom and give it to David. Verse 11. Ishbosheth didn't dare say another word because he was afraid of what Abner might do. What's a fool like? A fool leads by fear, threats, manipulation. That's what a fool who is a leader does. To manipulate others by threats to get his way. Sometimes we know that today as bullying. Leading by fear. That's the third. There's a fourth. Now I'll go back to verse 1 of chapter 3 and then to verse 12 through 21. What happens next? Abner, as you see, is the consummate negotiator. He has figured out that the house of Saul is going down. That's what verse 1 says. The house of David was going up. And so, if you look at verse 1, it goes something like this. As time passed, David became stronger and stronger, while Saul's dynasty became weaker and weaker. What's Abner trying to do? You see, what Abner does is this. He checks on that strategic relationship matrix. You remember that one? Yeah, he looks at that and says, what am I going to do in this situation? My kingdom, Saul's, is going down. David's kingdom is rising. What do? Relationship, strategic matrix. And he says this to himself. How can I make the greatest profit still with a low degree of maintenance? What can I do to still get something out of this mess? Right? You see, Ishbosheth is becoming high maintenance and of no profit to him whatsoever. So it's an easy decision. High profit, low maintenance, the cash cow. Oh, that's easy. That's David. And so what does he do? Without batting an eyelid, verse 12, Abner sent messengers to David saying, make a solemn pact with me, and I will help turn over all of Israel to you. Right? Low maintenance, high profit. Turn it over to you. You know what a fool does? He acts according to self-interest. Now you might see that in here, he was actually doing a good thing for everybody. But you see, underneath what he was doing was self-interest. And that's the hard part about fools, because you can't see it. He's convincing because he speaks the religious language to the people. He persuades Israel to unify with David and Judah. And these are his words in verse 18, if you look at it. He says to the people of Israel, convincingly, now is the time, for the Lord has said, I have chosen David to save my people from all their enemies. Oh my goodness, so why did you do that at first? Why did you have to wait this time in order to basically hand over to David the whole kingdom? If you knew that the kingdom was promised to David, that he is actually the king of all of it, why didn't you do it on the first day? You see, he's a smooth salesman. Abner spoke, verse 18, he spoke all that seemed good to Israel and to the whole house of Benjamin. Smooth words, convincing. And they said, yes. But you see, underneath the religious flattery, he was trying to get the most profit while saving his own skin. Getting the most profit while saving his own skin. Now, let me say this. If you're a salesperson, beware. Guess what? I'm a salesperson too, in a way. We are selling a product, but it just so happens, who are we selling? Not really selling, but we're trying to convince people concerning Jesus Christ. Salesmen, saleswomen, salespeople, we all need the caution here. Why? Because sometimes we might be selling something we know nothing of. We're selling something we don't even believe in. We might be selling something and trying to convince others to buy when we ourselves aren't convinced by it. Then what's going on there, right? Well, we all do that to make $1. Oh, there's nothing wrong in making $1, but there's something wrong when there's deception. So there's a word for this. It starts with the letter H. But I won't tell you what that word is because you already know what that word is. A fool acts according to self-interest. And so we continue on in verse 22 through 30. Here's the fifth. Joab just returns to Hebron. Joab now. Remember, Abner and David, they have a pact together, an agreement, like a truce. Okay, we'll surrender all of it to you, David. Now, Joab just returns to Hebron from a military campaign. He's back. And he gets wind that David actually and Abner had a lavish get-together for this signing ceremony. Joab hears about it. And he's upset. Who wouldn't be? He's upset that his uncle, his king, this King David, would stoop so low and play into the deceitful hands of Abner. He's upset. He's probably saying in his mind, has David forgotten what he did to his nephew Asahel? And that spear that bears his name, Abner? You know, this show of white flag to David, white flag of surrender from Abner, doesn't he realize it's just a trick? It's a ruse. He's making a cash cow out of you, David. Can't you see that? And what's Abner trying to do? Is he after my position? I'm the general of David. He's the general of Saul. What's he going to do with his unification? Take me out of my job? You see, all these things can get into his head. And so what does Joab do? Remember, Asahel, 500 points. Joab sends his men out to bring Abner back to Hebron. Then in that dark alley with no security cameras, verse 27 goes like this. Joab took him aside at the gateway as if to speak with him privately. But then he stabbed Abner where? Of course in the stomach, and killed him in revenge for killing his brother Asahel. A fool wins at all cost. All cost. You see, it's not just vengeance. It's not just justice. But it's about who gets the upper hand. And part of it is turf protection. Right? Wins at all costs. You know, some of us are so competitive that to lose is just not acceptable. You have people like that around you? To lose in anything is not acceptable. Well, it's hard to live around such people. Here's the final thing in chapter 4. See how quick we are? We're in chapter 4 now. Just 12 verses. Well, Abner's dead. Right? 360 of Saul's house is dead at that pool. 18 of David's house dead. Plus Asahel, that's 19. What is it? It's a tit for tat. You do this, I do this. Then you do that, then I'll do this. And then you do another thing, I'll do another thing. A tit for tat. News of Abner's death reaches Mahanaim. The camp of Israel, they hear that Abner is dead. And now the scared puppet king, remember what's his name? Ishbosheth. He's scared. And now his life is no longer secure because the strong man behind him, around him, is no longer there. So what happens? The political opportunists emerge from the rubble, right? This is so real, isn't it? Two of Ishbosheth's top men, security detail, two of them, they hatch an assassination plot. Their names, Baana and Rechab. Baana and Rechab, they enter Ishbosheth's residence, and while he was taking his siesta, you know what they did? He struck and killed him, cut off his head. Then taking his head with them, they fled across the Jordan Valley through the night. Now these are Ishbosheth's people. These are Israelites. What does a fool do? A fool begets more fools. A jerk begets more jerks. It's contagious. It's infectious. You see, what happens here is personal sins become structural sins. You see, my sin, left on itself, has the tendency for others to imitate and emulate, and therefore my sin becomes your sin, and when there's more of us who does the same thing, it becomes a structural sin where it's now difficult to change anything because we've allowed it to fester in us. Structural sin. Soon society is mired into this not only structural, but it's a cultural sin. Society is plagued by a never-ending spiral of violence and retaliation. Political expediency begins to trump morality. Who cares about what's right and wrong? Hey, this is political. You want to get up there, right? So you kill. There's EJK, extrajudicial killing. And we earn points before our leader because that's what our leader is like. Such a society of goons and gangs are breeding ground for more. Because such a style of life, you know what? It gets handed over to others without effort. It requires no effort whatsoever on your part to change anything. Just be who you are and keep on sinning. And guess what? The whole thing is contaminated. Verse 8 goes like this. When they arrived Hebron, they presented Ishbosheth's head to David, Rechab, Baana, and they said to David, king of Judah, look, here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of your enemy Saul, who tried to kill you. Huh. Isn't this familiar? It's like the Amalekite before David. Here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of your enemy. Remember your enemy Saul, who tried to kill you. Then he says this, today the Lord has given my Lord, the king, revenge on Saul and his entire family. Can you imagine? We can actually quote the Lord's name for our revengeful acts. That's incredible, isn't it? That's twisted morality. You know, if I would be permitted to add to their words, this Baana and Rechab, I'd say something like this. By the way, David, the names are Baana and Rechab. And here are our business cards. Don't forget the names. You see, they thought they would earn points. Actually, they earned something, the death penalty. That is what they earned. Hand and feet were cut off, hung beside the pool, Hebron pool. The story ends where the silly games begin, a fool's pool. Right? Full circle. The silliest thing, 24 people dead for sport. It comes back, and here, Rechab, Baana, the one who killed Ishbosheth, hung in that pool, their hands and their feet. Story ends where silly games begin. You know, this cycle of violence, vengeance, it is just the beginning of more. There's always more if it doesn't stop. Now, I'm not really sure what the score is anymore and who actually wins in this match. Truth is, no one wins games like these. Nobody wins. Everybody loses. You see, here, only Joab is left. Now, let me say this one thing. You see, when you bring together three ingredients, the product is deadly. What are those three? Number one, revenge. Number two, insecurity. And number three, personal ambition. You bring those three together and you get death. R.I.P. Be very careful when you're in power or have authority. Be very sure to check your heart for these three incendiary ingredients. Ask yourself, ask your dearest friends to call you out when they spot these things in your life. Check them out, friends, spiritual friends. If I have a revengeful spirit in me, if I am insecure as a person, and that I need to prove myself somewhere else, and that I have personal ambition to rise to something. You see, when you put those three together, be very, very careful. Call each other out when you see any of those three, because it can turn deadly. What do we do? Spot these in your life, and as early as now, ask God's Spirit to snuff out those flames that burn and bite. And if these are in your heart, you're in the game, my friend. You're in the game. Be very careful. So what do we do with these three chapters? 83 verses long. And you know what? Only 30% is actually devoted to David, the man after God's own heart. 70% of these three chapters are devoted to Abner and Joab. Sometimes I scratch my head. Why in the world would the Word of God devote so much airtime to jerks? Right? Because when non-believers see stories like this, they come to me, why is your God like that? Why is your Bible like that? And sometimes I cringe, I'm ashamed sometimes, because these gory stories in the Bible, sometimes I feel unable to defend it. You know, why are they there? I can't sweep them under the rug simply because it's bad publicity for followers of Christ. And then I gain some insight to all this. Here's the insight. Jerks. And sometimes I'm the jerk. Jerks are included in God's plan for faithful following. Fools are normal. It's part of God's economy in our lives of discipleship. They are accounted for, but here's the point. Even though fools and jerks are part of God's plan, they can never and should never destroy your faith journey in Jesus Christ. Did you hear me? Even the fools and jerks, and sometimes we're that, they all mill around us. Remember, they can never and should never destroy your walk with Jesus Christ. And so jerks, there will always be. And again, sometimes I am the jerk. Just this morning, I was a big jerk. Almost had an accident. You know, I was crossing this main street from where I live. Red light. I was stopped in the red light, but I was scanning the radio, you see. Scanning the radio, and I was looking whether it's green already or red or green, scanning. Then suddenly I just jerked forward, and it was red. I don't know what happened to my mind. I just thought it was time to move forward, and good enough, I attended the early morning prayer. There was nobody there except one car. One car that was speeding on the other side, crossing the lane, and with a loud honk, I stopped in the middle of that intersection. Major intersection. And I said, wow, that was really close. Just another split second forward, I don't know where I am, because that guy was speeding. Sometimes I'm the fool. But here's the deal. Jerks will be around us. And yes, they will even be in the community of faith. And jerks may be so God-aware that they can speak the language very well. They're God-aware. But you know what? They are remarkably so self-unaware. You know what I'm saying? You are so God-aware, but you have no idea what's going on inside your heart. You're unaware of your motivations. You're unaware of the destruction you're causing some of God's people. Jerks believe they're living for the kingdom in this Christ, when in reality they're living for themselves. And that's the reason why it's important to have accountability. As Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. That's the reason we need small groups, so that we can have relationships with each other. Not just relationships of getting together for fun and having a good time and encouraging one another, but to point out, to call us out when needed. We need everybody to say, Pastor Carlos, ang yabang mo talaga. Sarap mong suntukin. Tell me, please. Tinagalog ko yun para hindi maintindihan ng mga nakakaalam. Pastor Carlos, you are like this, you're like that. You have to tell me. And tell your friends when you see something. And don't worry about the log that's in your eye, because somebody else will point that out to you. Do it in faithfulness to God for the sake of your brother and sister in Christ. Now let me end with just three points, 3 lessons. Number 1, what do we learn? We learn God's way isn't just about destiny, right? Yes, we have a destiny. God has a purpose for us, custom-made purpose, life calling for us, so that when He actually makes His purpose known to us, He equips us, He ordains us for His greatest glory, for the maximum expansion of His kingdom, right? That's our destiny. But you see, it's not just about destiny. The journey is just as important. Marshall Shelley actually said this. He calls jerks dragons. And he says this about dragons. The goal in handling dragons is not to destroy them, not merely to disassociate, but to make them disciples. Make them disciples, even when that seems an unlikely prospect. You know what the Apostle Paul tells us? He tells us in 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 1 to 3, something like this. He admonishes us to walk and excel more in our walk. In other words, not just walk, but keep on getting stronger, more excellent in your walk. In other words, keep on walking, not just keep on walking, but get better and better in your walk, because this is the will of God, your sanctification. Your holiness is the will of God. In other words, it's not just about events. Because I get saved, that's an event. When I turn myself over to Jesus Christ, that's an event. He saves me right there. My glorification, when my body and soul are together in the coming of Christ, that's another event. It's called glorification. But in between salvation, justification by faith, and glorification, being with Jesus forever, in between is this process of sanctification. He is making us more and more like Him. And so these fools around us are meant to be shapers so that we are more and more becoming like Jesus Christ. You see, the point is this. We are in between 2 events, big events. And the process is called sanctification. The journey is not just getting from point A to point B. It is about being in point B, and then being in point A, and then becoming in point B. Did you get the difference? It's not just Christian life. It's not just about waiting for that glorious time when Jesus Christ returns, or if He chooses not to return, I die. Anyway, I'm saved. See, that journey, yes, that's the journey, but it's not just those 2 events. We're being changed from glory to glory. And therefore, when we move from point A to point B, it's not just being in point A, but becoming in point B. Amen? Amen. The second thing is this. Yes, then we need to be wary of toxic people or jerks who seemingly look after your interests. Sometimes even God's interests. But in reality, it's self-interest. They look after self-interest first and foremost. And therefore, what it is a duplicitous life. Looking great on the outside, but inside is another. Be careful of those people. And third, finally, is this. Don't wait for the ducks to line up in your life before you take God seriously. Why do I say that? Because we have a tendency to wait for the opportune time before we take God really seriously. You know, I'll take God seriously once my children grow up, once they all graduate, when I land my dream job, when I make my first million, or maybe first 10,000 is enough. When I get married, when I retire, when my parents are healthy, then I'll take God seriously. What am I saying? Don't wait. You know what David's been doing all this time? You know the 30% that we didn't talk about? What's David been up to? He sought God's guidance. He blessed those who blessed the king. He covenanted with others for the kingdom's sake. He dispensed of justice. He mourned. He provided a decent burial for the innocent. He kept his vows to the Lord. He did what the Lord required right there and then, on the job and on the spot. He didn't wait for tomorrow to line up. He took God seriously with all the jerks and fools around him, not when his circumstances got better. And guess what? That's a good chance. There's a good chance. There is a very good chance that our circumstances will not get any better. Now, that's not to give you bad news. But that's just to put some spin into what I need to emphasize. Take God seriously right now. You see, you never really know when the right moment comes with God. All we have is today. He doesn't ask you to be faithful tomorrow. He asks faithfulness today. And life's tragedy is not that it ends so soon, but that we wait so long to begin it. And if there's anything to learn with David and his journey with jerks, it is this. Start life right now. Don't wait for ideal conditions to come into your life. Take God seriously today. Don't wait. Do it right now.